Most artists think nailing proportions is the secret to a great portrait, but even perfect measurements can leave a drawing flat and lifeless. After decades of drawing and 17 years of tattooing portraits, I've learned exactly what works. So I'm going to show you 6 practical fixes that have helped my students capture real likeness in just a week. Okay, so practical fix number 1. I used to focus on hyperrealism using the grid method because my only focus was detail, detail, and more detail. The more detail I added, the closer I would naturally get to my drawing. But when I transitioned to freehand and I did the same thing, it actually made my drawings much worse. Let me show you why. If I bet you 100 quid to draw a line in between these 2 lines, the very first thing that you would do is get real close to it. And that's exactly how most people draw proportions, like it's surgery. But here's the kicker. That's actually the worst thing that you can do. We want to see the entirety of what we're doing because the features, the angles, and the tonal shapes are all in relation to each other. Up close, you judge the tiny details and you miss the big mistakes. So draw your proportions and your base shading at an arm's length. If it reads from a distance, it will look even better up close. Okay, practical fix number 2. No matter if you've been drawing for 1 week, 1 year, or 10 years, halfway through your drawing, you will step back and you will be looking at something that looks like this, the ugly stage. And for beginners, not only can that really knock their confidence, but it also puts them in a state of panic and then they start cramming detail in, thinking that that is what's going to help bring it back. But that's actually the worst thing that you can do because when you add detail, you are locking in those mistakes. So now any corrections you need to make are 10 times harder. Here's the key. The ugly stage is a normal part of the process. Like losing your baby teeth before your adult teeth come in. It looks worse before it looks better. When you hit that ugly stage, you want to bring clarity to your foundation. Your foundation are the big shadow shapes and the overall structure, not the eyelashes or the pupils. And if you need help building your foundation, I've made a free portrait tool and with 1 click tells you exactly what to aim for. So you spend less time in the ugly stage and start capturing likeness much earlier on. Okay, practical fix number 3. Have you ever drawn a portrait that looks great at the start and somehow looks worse by the end? The proportions were working, the shading felt balanced, so then what changed? Well, as you blend and you add layers, naturally the structure starts to soften. Some of the edges get lost and everything slowly starts to feel like it's drifting. When this happens, most people think that you need to move the eyes or move the nose, when in fact it's actually much simpler than that. You just need to redefine your shadow shapes that you initially had. Most people think that the drawing process goes structure, shading, details, when in fact it goes structure, shading, structure, shading, structure, shading, details. It's very difficult to say. Okay, practical fix number 4. Most portraits fail in the first 30 minutes. It's a bold statement, I know, but let me show you why. When we draw a portrait, our brains are thinking of the end result and how we want it to look. So we rush the boring beginning stages and then spend the next 2 hours fixing the problems that we created in the first 30 minutes. How you start a portrait directly impacts how the rest of the drawing goes. It's like sprinting off at the start line in a marathon. You can do that, but now the rest of the race is going to be a killer. Instead of trying to finish it as quickly as you can so you can get to the details, focus on the beginning stages, not the end result. The core lights, the core shadows, that's your foundation, and your foundation is everything. If you can get your foundation to work, you have basically ironed out any creases in the first 20% of the drawing. So now the end result is not only going to become 10 times easier, but you're also going to have a much stronger drawing. You might have seen other people starting with the eyes and not focusing on the foundation. I do that sometimes as well. But here's the thing. There's no one right way of drawing. There's just easier ways and more difficult ways. And if you're learning, focusing on your foundation first is the easier way to get better results. That's exactly how my students have gone from this to this. Okay, practical fix number 5. Have you ever been caught in a drawing where it feels like you're trying to carve stone with your fingernails, painstakingly trying to move things around by millimeters only to realize that other areas are still off? And you will fight this battle because you want to draw the best portrait that you can. Here's the issue. That exact process is actually killing your progress. Sounds strange, right? But here's why. If I gave you 100 hours to draw one portrait, and I gave someone else 100 hours to draw as many portraits as they can, who's going to have more experience at the end? It's obvious, right? The person who has drawn as many portraits as they can, because they've gone through the process potentially 30 more times than the first person. Sure, they might have made their best drawing, but they only went through the process once. Perfection kills progression. Now, I'm not saying don't try your hardest, but there's a difference between mindlessly obsessing and actually getting real improvement. So if you find your portrait doesn't look any different after an hour in those later stages, and it's not a commission, take what you've learned and apply it to the next drawing. Which leads me to practical fix number 6. Most people finish a portrait and immediately jump to the next one without actually processing what they've drawn. And that's basically like leaving money on the table. Drawing portraits is problem solving. You've just made 100 tiny decisions, hit a bunch of hurdles, and learned things that you didn't know before. So instead of jumping from one drawing to another, ask yourself these 3 questions. What do I like about the drawing? What don't I like about the drawing? And what's the one thing I want to improve on next time? Here's why these questions are so powerful. What do I like about the drawing? Most artists skip this and go straight to what's wrong. But if you don't identify what worked, you'll never repeat it. Maybe you got a cleaner likeness, or your shading feels more solid. That's a win that you ideally want to lock in. What don't I like about the drawing? This is how you build your artist eye. Not to beat yourself up, but to be able to diagnose the real problem. Where did it go wrong? At what moment did you realize something changed? If you can identify it, you can fix it. What's one thing I want to improve on next time? This turns reflection into action. Otherwise, you finish with that vague feeling of just meh, and you repeat the same mistakes. Pick one area to focus on for the next portrait. Maybe it's concentrating on the foundation or simplifying the shadow shapes before the blending. Do this every time and improvement stops becoming accidental and it becomes intentional. But here's the issue. There's one mistake I see again and again that most artists make that throws their proportions completely off. So watch this video here so you nail likeness every single time.